This is wonderful. What a great afternoon. We have a nice little chat planned with some of our friends and visitors from across our nation. My name is Jody Harbour. I'm co-founder of Grandmother's Voice. I'm also an Indigenous education lead at the Halton Catholic District School Board. I work with Sherry Sayville, that's also here with us. We have some amazing, vibrant youth that have joined us, Gabrielle and Marshall and Kailynne and Makasa LookingHorse. And I only said Makasha's last name because I can't remember everybody's. But it's so wonderful to have you guys here. It really is. This is the first real kind of debut that we brought all of our youth together. We've worked with Gabrielle and Marshall in the past from We Matter. And Kailynne is a youth in our community here in Halton, and she's been out to our events, and she supports us in any way that she can. And then we also obviously support her in everything that she does. And Makasa as well is an ambassador. All of these youth are ambassadors for We Matter, ambassadors for our community, and ambassadors for Grandmother's Voice, which is an organization that began with grandmothers and women in our community that were just really looking for a place to support each other and to support the work that needs to be done in our community. And it's just grown into a space where people want to come together and be a part of what we're doing here. So this is a two-part series that we ran this week for Treaty Week here in Ontario. And it was really wonderful. We had Maurice Switzer that did our first video on Monday morning, and we've shared that through our YouTube channels. And we're here today to let the youth talk about what Maurice's messages were and how he shared his knowledge with us, and then also really to give them that this platform to share their voice. Because that's exactly what this time is about right now, is kind of stepping aside and letting our youth step in and start to make things happen. And so we're really honored to have you here on the Speak Up and Empower platform, which again is another space and platform that a good friend of mine, Karen, has created for organizations like this and for people like us that are heart-centered, loving, amazing people doing this work from that space of love. So I'd really love to pass it over to my good friend and co-founder of Grandmother's Voice and my boss at the school board. I love to say that because she is a trailblazer, been a pioneer in Halton, and does this work so amazing. Her knowledge is great, and her friendship is like from the stars. And so I just, Sherry Sayville, thank you. And thank you for supporting me always and my voice and the work that I do.
Thanks, Jody. It's always a pleasure to be on this forum, and it gets me out of my comfort zone as well, because it's not something that I would normally do, is go on live and interview people. So we kind of complement each other, I suppose, and get outside of our comfort zone. Hello, everyone. I'm Sherry Sayville. I'm also, Cree from Treaty 6 territory, since we're talking about treaties. Treaty 6 is in Saskatchewan and extends to Alberta, and it was signed back in 1884, 1886. And and here, this is what we're here to talk about. We had a lot of within our numbered treaties. We had an awful lot of treaty promises that have never been uplifted or upheld. I'm sorry. As well as certain things that are happening around the world today, or in our country today, that those treaty promises aren't being upheld. So I'm so honored to have each and every one of you here. We talk about the land of our ancestors, and I said that I am Cree from Treaty 6 territory, but I also have settler background as well. My father came from England, but he died when I was quite young, and so my mother is the one that raised me. So I'm raised by my mother and her teachings and her experiences. My mother is also a residential school survivor, and I'm also a 60 scoop kid. So I was taken away from her when we were quite young. So there was an awful lot of things that was happening in our lives as well that I never learned. I never learned about the treaties when I was younger. I never learned about Indigenous education like we are. And I know that Maurice Switzer had talked about, this generation now is the first generation ever in Canadian history to learn about treaties, as well as Indigenous perspectives, culture, things like that. That's really, really important. So I'm going to ask Gabriel, and Marshall to introduce themselves as well, if you don't mind.
Hi, I'm going to introduce myself in my language. Tanse Nitisni Gase Niwa Yayitinisquel Wapscal Muscle Gabrielle Don Jubinville. Hi, my name is Gabrielle Don Jubinville. Alberta, outside on the outskirts of Edmonton. I literally say this all the time when I'm engaging in these important conversations that need to be happen. And I'm just super excited and blessed, and I just can't wait to talk with you guys. It really uplifts me, and I really love to be around people that
you're cutting out.
The same
We're having a hard
interest
time
and want to empower people and want to educate also in a good way. So I'm super proud to be here and lucky.
Marshall, let's try you. Because your Wi-Fi keeps on cutting in and out.
Hi, family from both northern communities in Manitoba. Oh, are we second? How about now? Okay, hold up. Let's see.
Do you have everything off? Can you hear us now?
Yeah, we can hear you.
Hello.
Hi, Gabriel. I'm Marshall. Go ahead.
Okay, all good. You heard Gabrielle introduce herself?
It was in and out, so
Okay.
maybe we might go back.
Awesome. Sorry about that. Yes, Tansei, bonjour, hello.
Oh, technical difficulties.
Okay. Did we get that?
No.
Okay, about.
We'll come back to you, and I'll get Makasa to introduce herself, and then we'll come back to both you, Marshall and Gabriel. Hello, Makasa. Would you mind introducing yourself and where you're from and the reason why you're here?
Okay. Sego everybody. My name's Makasa LookingHorse. Sego Swegwego Makasha Yats Gahaga Nugo Hunjoda Wakatahuni. Six Nations Dino Ageno. Hi everybody. My name is Makasa LookingHorse, and I live in Six Nations. I'm Mohawk and Cayuga. I'm Mohawk Wolf Clan and Lakota. My father's Chief Orville LookingHorse, and my mother's Dr. Don Martin Hill. I grew up mainly in Six Nations, but in the summertime, I usually go to my dad's for the summer in South Dakota. And yeah, I am a student at McMaster University, level 4 in undergraduate Indigenous Studies. And I am a host for Oneganos Let's Talk Water that happens every Thursday at 7 p.m. on Oneganos Water is Life Facebook page, so you can watch us live every single Thursday, and we talk. We have a variety of things that we talk about that has to do with climate change and water, yeah, I think I'm super happy to be here, and I'm happy that grandmother's voices exist. And I'm happy to be a new ambassador for them. And I'm excited to continue this journey and learn more about what we do and my roles. So yeah.
Thank you, Makasa. Marshall and Gabriel, do you want to try again? Gabrielle.
Hello. Can you hear us now? Okay, sorry about that. Okay, I'm gonna introduce myself in my Cree language. Tanse Natisni Gasin, Niwaya Utinisco, Wapsco, Muscoesco, Gabrielle Don Jubinville. My name is Gabrielle John Jubinville. I'm from Treaty 6 territory, from Muskego-Suck, translated into Enoch Cree Nation, just on the outskirts of Edmonton. I also have European background. My dad is half British and half Scottish. That's all I really know about that. I'm super excited to talk about the treaties, and I'm just super grateful to be here, and hopefully we have no more technical difficulties. But yeah, I'm just super grateful to just be here. Yeah.
Hello, Tanse, bonjour. My name is Marshall Jack Morrisseau. I am both Indigenous in Nowak, which is Cree, and Métis. I have family that descends from Opassawek Cree Nation as well as Massaguin Cree Nation. Those are both northern communities here in Manitoba. And my family's from the Red River Settlement. So we actually were active participants in the negotiations of the Manitoba Act, which is one of the oldest pieces of legislation in Canada, which basically allowed Canada to become a confederation. So I'm very proud of that my family and my ancestors were a part of those negotiations. Whereas we're going to be talking about today's treaty negotiations, which I have a background in as well with my family from my Cree side. So I'm very grateful to be here, and I'm really excited to talk with you folks about these very, very important topics.
Thanks, Marshall and Gabriel. What about you, Kailynne? I know you're there on the phone.
Hi.
Hi, Kailynne.
Hi, my name is Kailynne Hamilton, and I am from Ontario. I'm in around Jody's area, actually. I am Métis on my father's side, but that's about all we know because my father was a 60s scoop, and he did not know his biological parents, so he was adopted by British immigrants in the 60s. So I'm very unaware of exactly what my family's history is, but I'm here to learn and to engage in my culture that most of my family has lost over many, many decades, and to hopefully share what knowledge I do have and to hear other Indigenous people talk about their knowledge and experience. I'm very excited to be here, and it's a wonderful opportunity. Yeah, thank you.
Thanks, Kailynne. And so we're here today just to talk about treaty, and not only that, to have a youth perspective of what treaty means to possibly them, what they may know. But we just give a little bit of background that between 1871 and 1921, the Canadian government and some First Nations signed a series of 11 treaties, and they're called the Number Treaties. And so there were certain promises that were in those agreements, and one of them was health. Healthcare is mentioned in Treaty 6, in the Treaty 6 treaty, which they talk about a medicine chest. And so to us, when we talk about a medicine chest, that is our healthcare. And we have education as well in the numbered treaties. And the government promised in the numbered treaties for maintaining schools on our reserves and paying only for the teachers' salaries and to simply provide the education for First Nations kids. We We wanted education, but we didn't want residential schools. We didn't want our kids and our families to be ripped apart and taken away. Also in those number treaties is the hunting, fishing, and trapping. All numbers treaties stated that First Nations people have the right to hunt and fish and to trap on surrendered areas, and except on land taken up for settlement. So, and that's a different thing, mining, lumbering, and other government purposes, but we had the right to hunt, fish, and trap. And we also had land. Land was given in specific numbers of treaties, and it depends on how much land, depends on which treaty area that you're in. So in my First Nation on Treaty 6, every single member was allotted 32 acres a person. So that made up the reserve in a sense, right? And then also in our area in Treaty 6 territory was annuities. We were promised $5 a year at forever, right? Which has never gone up in inflation. So $5 a year doesn't really buy you much, these times, right? So, I just want to touch base on those kinds of things, because sometimes people don't really understand what's in those treaties. And now we're having the opportunity to be able to speak about those treaties in schools. So I guess I'm going to ask Marshall and Gabriel first. What kind of education did you get when you were younger, and you're still young, but when you were in high school about treaties, aside from what you already know from your families?
Go first. What I can say is I never really got an education on it. I've been in Catholic schools mostly my whole upbringing. I don't really remember any talk about treaties. I probably have heard the word a couple times, but not in school. Definitely apart from it. When I started to learn about it, I knew the effects of what it brought to my family, and more so I noticed it started taking an effect in my life as during now when I'm in university, and when you're in Native studies, right? It's just playing out right there. I do have a passion that it should be taught at the youngest ages. I'm all for that. And yeah.
And likewise for me too. It wasn't taught to me in my younger years in schools. I grew up here in an urban environment, so there wasn't much taught about really anything about Indigenous history, treaties. They did, however, in high school talk about the residential school system, but even that was sort of not talked about in the right manner it should have been. It was very just triggering, and also very insensitive the way the teachers kind of talked about it. And yeah, like I said, treaties was something that wasn't really that I never had the chance of learning about in school.
I guess I can also relate to the residential school. It was talked about in a religion class one time in grade 10, and I never really grew up on the history of it. I did go to a ceremony when I was lucky enough, because my cookum is a residential school survivor. And she had my mom when she was in residential school, and she was taken away during the 60s scoop. And I was lucky enough where my first 3 siblings weren't as lucky, because in that time period that my mom had them, they were put into CFS for probably 10 years of their life and so on. So I guess going back when I was in grade 10, that little girl when I was 15, they're saying, how did residential school help us? And one girl raised her hand and said, Natives are all drunks and alcoholics. And I raised my hand and I said, you just called me and my whole family drunks and alcoholics. And the professor, the high school teacher didn't even do anything. And he said, everything's a religion except the Catholic Church. how ridiculous, like we're, you know, I guess we're supposedly in the 21st century. And yeah.
Makasa, would you like to share some of your experiences in school? If you learned anything about treaties, especially where you're in a totally different area, which is the Haldeman track. And that was granted for the allyship of Haudenosaunee with the Crown in 1784, I think. So when you were in public school, what kind of education were you getting around that particular land claim?
Well, in high school, I went to a regular high school, and it was more so where like farmers were. And luckily, I was able to go to school with a lot of natives. But even though we had a lot of natives, it still was not like really discussed the treaties. And similar to their Marshall and Gabrielle, um, like, yeah, we did talk about residential schools, but it wasn't like in depth. And I think it was a struggle for our Indigenous teacher to bring more, I guess, Native content into our teachings and be taught about like how to like break corn husk dolls or something. We did get to learn that in high school, but our Indigenous teacher in our Indigenous Studies class. But I know that she had struggles because it's not in the curriculum, and we did not have like extra money to learn those things. And yeah, it just basically wasn't in the curriculum. So she wasn't allowed, not she wasn't allowed to teach it, but she had a hard time teaching it, whereas it shouldn't be hard to teach the treaties because it's a relationship between the Haudenosaunee or Indigenous peoples and non-Indigenous peoples on the land that we're on. And everybody, it should be taught in the history class, and it should have been taught to everybody. And I think it's just that they don't know that their roles. And I think that needs to start like in the board meetings, and like they need to be taught and put through school themselves, the teachers probably, to learn history and to actually get it, and not to like criticize or look down on learning the treaties because it's old. Like, it's not, it's still living, it's still a living treaty today. And it's a relationship between us and Canada, and that's Canada's responsibility, and Canadian citizens need to uphold their part. So they need to know their roles. So, yeah. So I think it's not just the Indigenous people who should be learning. It's both Canadian and Indigenous people who need to be learning our roles and how that we can work together, such as like our two-row wampum. Like, how can we apply this? We should be taught how to apply this in a workspace, in our normal society. We need to be like taught how to apply our treaties in our everyday life. And I think that still needs to happen. And if it was taught in high schools, I think like you would learn how to do that because you're becoming an adult. You should know how to do that. But yeah, no, I was not taught treaties in high school.
Kailynne, what about you?
When it comes to Indigenous education, it was kind of a bit complicated in my experience because it depended on the teacher, what we learned, and how much we got into it. I mean, first of all, Indigenous education in general is very limited in elementary and high schools. And our history is very whitewashed and very biased. And so often what we learn is very towards the side of colonizers. So I, at least in my experience, I learned very little about treaties as a kid. What we did learn about was some practices, like ancient practices of Indigenous people. We did learn that to a certain extent, but when it came to actual treaties, I don't think I learned about that until maybe grade 8, because I had a very wonderful history teacher when I was in grade 8 who was very passionate about Indigenous issues and teaching about the history of Indigenous people. It was a very interesting class, but until then and even after then, it has been very limited. I'm in grade 11 now, and still it's only ever really been that teacher who's gotten into treaties. It's often kind of glazed over, I think. The history of Indigenous people and treaties and all of that subject is kind of glazed over in a lot of history classes. I've definitely had teachers who don't mention it at all. So I think it's something that needs to be talked about when it comes to the board education, to implement more, not just like Indigenous people into the board and as teachers, but people who have experience with education and making history classes to be less whitewashed. I think that that's a really important thing to accomplish in school boards, because it often feels very glazed over. So yeah.
Now, in most of the schools, especially out here, anyhow, in Ontario, Marshall and Gabrielle, we're doing land acknowledgements, right? And I don't know if that's happening out in Manitoba and Saskatchewan and Alberta. Sometimes I do hear, we're on the traditional territories of such and such. But here in Ontario, we have these land acknowledgements, and that was part of one of the calls to action during the Truth and Reconciliation. But sometimes it just becomes words, right? I can recite our land acknowledgement, but what does it mean, right? So within our land acknowledgement with Halton, as we know it, is rich in the modern traditions of many First Nations, the Haudenosaunee, the Attawattaran, the Potawatomi, and the Métis. And the history is steeped in Indigenous history, from the plants, the waters, the animals, right? And we come in solidarity with the stewards of the land, who right now are the Mississaugas of the Credit. But yet we know that there's been many, many people that have made Southern Ontario, what we now know as Ontario, home. And so what we're asking our board at Halton Catholic is to go deeper with your land acknowledgement. Make it personal. Make it look, have an understanding of somebody's land was taken away for you to be here. Right? We know that there was a pass system, well, not pass, but there was land that was given away to settlers when they first came here. They didn't have to pay for anything, any of the land, just as long as they cleared the land in a couple of years. We know that up in the Haldimand tract, that there was an awful lot of squatters that were along that track. That numerous times the elected the hereditary chiefs had asked for protection from the squatters, but yet there was, like somebody had said, this is Canadians' responsibility, Canada's responsibility, and the rest of Canadians to learn this. And and I just want to get your opinions about what the land acknowledgement means to you as young Indigenous folk. And how that can be really unpacked more than just reading the words. Kailynne, do you want to go first this time?
I can, yeah. I have a kind of an interesting experience with land acknowledgements, because I actually implemented the use of land acknowledgements in my middle school, which was a great accomplishment. But I've run into a lot of issues with some principals and other teachers and things like that who are very reluctant to implement land acknowledgements, even though it tend to be required in school announcements. I know that my school absolutely does not do a land acknowledgement. My high school has never. I've talked to my principal about it, but he ignores me. So it's something that is very frustrating because I've tried for years, ever since I got into the school, to try to implement the land acknowledgement, but I've just been ignored by teachers and my principal. So it's not something I think a lot of people are very adamant about. I don't really think they care very much. I think that when land acknowledgements are implemented, sometimes, like you said, it is just simply words, and it's just reciting something that was written for them, and it doesn't actually mean anything to them. And I think when you make land acknowledgements a lot more specific and personal to the area, it would feel and mean a lot more to Indigenous people than just simply reciting something that was written and implemented for them. I think a lot of work needs to go into it, a lot more work than it has been. And I understand how difficult it can be to come up with something that is much more specific, because I think a lot of people don't realize the exact history of the area and what people resided on it years and years ago. But I think that is something that we need to, start educating and learning more about, is our specific areas and what different nations lived exactly where we are and what land we reside on specifically. I think it's important for us to recognize that it's something that we need to learn and not just know generalized information, because it's important to recognize the specific people that lost their land to us. So, obviously, I also have European background. So as much as I am Indigenous, I am also European, and my ancestors were also colonizers. And so even as an Indigenous person, it is still important for me to recognize the people that lost their land and their rights to my ancestors. And so that's something that's very important to me, and something I think that it should be worked on in the school board. But it's a bit difficult to understand how that would happen sometimes, because it's a bit difficult to get people to listen at times. But I think it's something that we need to start a conversation about, definitely.
Wonderful. Makasa, what about your opinion really about land acknowledgements, what they mean to you, and from a personal standpoint, and should teachers and principals go beyond the land acknowledgement, like standing in solidarity with Indigenous people, those kinds of things?
Yeah, I think that they should. My personal opinion on land acknowledgements, you're just kind of saying words, and it gets like that if you don't put anything into action, if you don't do anything about it. And I think I can't believe that her high school is not implementing land acknowledgements just because they don't think it's important. If it's a policy, if it was made in policy, then that should be said. And I think it would help if it was tailored specific to the land that high school is on. But I know in different areas that might be a little bit contentious, I could say, right now anyways, sometimes in different areas, depending where you are. But yeah, I think if you're going to do a land acknowledgement, and right now, if it's in policy and they are doing it, then they definitely should be standing in solidarity with Indigenous peoples. They should be supporting their Indigenous students in every way that they can, because it's definitely not easy going to school. And we have to overcome different obstacles, and it's very, very hard, I think. And I think that, yeah, they need to do something for Indigenous Peoples Day, and have those holidays and do something. I'm not exactly sure what kind of things that they can do, maybe support, raise awareness if their local community doesn't have access to clean drinking water, if basic human rights, if the community doesn't have those things, then advocate for it. or advocate for it all year and bring it to people's attentions. And they don't even have to do that like just as a high school for the land acknowledgement. I think that should be done as like Canadians, because that's what that's what our friendship is supposed to be. Like, we help you, you help us, and since you're on our land and took all of it, I think maybe you should help us have clean drinking water and proper housing and things like that. So yeah, that's my little bit of thoughts.
Thanks, Makasa. And Martin, Gabrielle, what is your opinions about the land acknowledgement and the importance of it, and as well as going beyond that land acknowledgement and standing in solidarity with Indigenous people?
Yeah, I think that the land acknowledgements, if they are like, they have to be made meaningful and not as used as sort of like as a token, because often I find it's very tokenized. Like here in the community, they'll hold events. They'll bring in a speaker to do a land acknowledgement and say a prayer, and then like that's like it. There's no like future discussions about like about how we can actually help like Indigenous people, like about like how can we support their causes, and like Makasa said, those communities that are suffering, like, are we just going to acknowledge the land that they're suffering on, or are we actually going to help them? So I think it's it can go both ways. And as far as like how I personally feel about it, I think it's a good step towards like understanding like the land that you're on, and like the histories behind it, and like the original occupants of those lands. It's important to understand that and start knowing that history, as a non-Indigenous person, because then you can start to actually understand that relationship and understand like how important the land is to Indigenous people. It can hopefully like spark like dialogue as to why we're giving land acknowledgements, instead of like the classic tokenized, okay, well, we're gonna put a stamp on it and that'll be it. So that's just my thoughts on the matter.
I know here in at Halton Catholic, we're really pushing people out of their comfort zone, and knowing that they've made their home in Halton, and really getting them to really think about, did their ancestors, or the town of Oakville, let's say, pay for that land accordingly, and how did their family gain the land? And so we're asking our community to go a little bit deeper than just what is on the words, right? When we have conversations with youth and young people within our school board, I look at that land acknowledgement and I say to them, if it was done in a way that was in accordance to our own learning, that land acknowledgement is somebody's PhD, right? Because you are learning the history of the land. You are learning the agreements of that land. You are learning the importance of water, of air, and of food, right? Because the land sustains us. And I always say that if we didn't have any air, clean air, and if we didn't have any air, we would perish in 3 minutes. If we didn't have clean drinking water, we'd die in 30 days. And if we didn't have any food, we die in 4 days, sorry, for water. And if we didn't have any food, it may be 30, maybe 40 days, right? So the land, the air, and the water is so important because it sustains us. And a lot of people don't really realize the importance of that sustainability. And if we don't have those things, we all perish. And during COVID, there's that saying right now that we're all in this together. Well, we're not all in this together, right? Because we wouldn't have communities that, if they don't have clean drinking water, being evacuated, and then, you know, and then the government saying, well, we're not going to pay you for being evacuated. So it happens in Manitoba, it happens in Saskatchewan, it happens in Ontario. And I know, Makasa, you're doing an awful lot of work with water, the environment, and raising the awareness of people that these things sustain us. And these are our agreements that we made originally to be neighbors, right? Because on the bottom of our little video here, it is the true row wampum, and the purple, the two purple beads is the one for the settlers, and one for us, that never are we going to cross each other to tell each other what to do, but we're going to go walk in this journey of life together, and we're going to help each other out. So when we do land acknowledgement, we talk a little bit more about water, you know, that's where I start questioning our administrators and our teachers, that we really need to, when we're saying that word solidarity, what does that word mean to you? So I'm going to ask you guys, what does that word solidarity mean to you? And I'm going to start with you, Makasa, if you don't mind.
I think that, well, I think I have to see like what in the dictionary, like what exactly does solidarity mean, and then I can like have my official opinions on it. But like a solidarity, like I think about it, like I think of like I guess like people bringing a issue to their attention, and I'm not too sure, like what does solidarity actually mean?
To me, solidarity means standing shoulder to shoulder.
Okay.
It means, like, you know, if there's a situation in a community, I'm going to go there and I'm going to help. I'm going to do whatever I can, whatever it takes, in order to uplift my agreement of the true wampum, of being friends, of friendship. So.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah, I know that different races have stood in solidarity with Indigenous peoples, and one example that I can think of is Standing Rock. When my father was there, so was my brother, and I was there in the summertime, and there was a lot of different people from all over the world that were there, and that was standing in solidarity to me, when people actually showed up and participated in the fight for clean water, basically. And so it, like, because that shouldn't have been happening, and the more people that were there and the more solidarity that people showed, it brought it to a global attention from around the world. And now everybody knows like what Standing Rock was, because it was a moment in time in history that all of these people stood in solidarity and were there, and they were taking bullets, they were getting pepper spray, there was dogs, it was freezing cold in the winter time, and just going through all of those hardships that Indigenous people have to go through just to have clean water was standing in solidarity. Because that is, I don't know how much closer like you can get to standing side by side with us and helping us fight for clean drinking water.
Kailynne, do you want to give us your opinion about what solidarity means to you, and how we can stand shoulder to shoulder with Indigenous communities as well as our settler communities?
Sure. To me, standing in solidarity with others is essentially supporting, uplifting, and standing with other people who are different than you. So my experience with that is a lot of Indigenous allies that I've met who are very upfront in supporting Indigenous voices. I think it's important when it comes to standing in solidarity with other minorities is to not speak over other people, but uplift the voices of Indigenous people who need to be heard. I think that's really important. While I don't have specific experiences like that, I have met a lot of really wonderful white allies in my life who have gone. One example is my mother, actually, who's a very vocal in grandmother's voice along with me, and is pretty close to Jody. So that is, it's very wonderful to have people like that in our community and who are there lifting up young, and especially young and youth Indigenous voices who are standing. That's solidarity means to me, is standing with other people who might not necessarily have the same support systems or same privilege, and lifting up other people's voices. That's to me what that means. Yeah.
Thanks, Kailynne. And Marshall and Gabrielle.
I think solidarity means respect from nation to nation. We were all different nations before they came here, and they don't treat us like it. They don't respect. According to what's going on in Nova Scotia right now, I think it's absolutely ridiculous. And I also think even when we I didn't say anything on the land claims part, but it just goes back straight to education. I feel like it's kind of very backwards. We should be educating what is the actual events in the history that made Canada up was the treaties, the number of treaties. And I feel like it can be like a black and white and very gray area of how we come upon speaking to people, or what actually Canadians actually know. And yeah, I just feel like we're not showing respect. And also to like standing in solidarity, like we have, like as nations too, like we have to practice it like everyday life, even if we're like on reserve or not on reserve, or if we're not on reserve, being that, like you said, shoulder to shoulder, standing by them in any way we possibly can in regards to what we can give, because we were all of us, I felt, were all nations that were on Canada before settler contact, were all very giving people in regards to that. So whatever we can, if we're not on the reserve, or if we're not with Nova Scotia, like how can we put forward to them so they can get the help that they need? Because it's wrong. It's just absolutely ridiculous. And yeah.
Marshall?
Yeah, solidarity just for me means holding space for one another. And for me, like I've been a part of the Brandon Bear Clan chapter here in our community. I was one of their outreach workers, so I coordinated like a patrol. So I'd be out on doing like outreach with the patrol groups, and we would, every night we would hold solidarity for the community by being out there in the streets, giving help to those in need, whether they're Indigenous or not. In most cases they are Indigenous, in terms of homelessness. But it's just, it's just being there, meeting people where they're at, and like holding space, like listening to what they have to say, and amplifying those voices. Like Gabrielle said, what's happening in Nova Scotia, like we're not over there, but there are things we can do to help support. And there's a number of ways, and yeah, I think standing shoulder to shoulder really, really is powerful. That's a powerful way to describe solidarity, because it's those simple things. And yeah.
I have been doing this work for a little while, and I understand about this much, and but when it comes to the land, the treaty, Supreme Court decisions, and yet there's Supreme Court decisions in the Marshall case, which is out in the Mi'kmaq territory in Nova Scotia, that the Supreme Court said, you have the right to make a moderate living. And when I wake up every single morning, Canada breaks the law every single day, right? Because it doesn't uphold those agreements that it already made. And when you're not upholding a Supreme Court decision, that is a huge problem that comes at the hands of Canada. And Canada needs to be held to account. And I think sometimes that if we get too much education as far as what the land and the Constitution and all these other things come to be, right, and play out, then there's more people in solidarity to understand the history, to understand the Supreme Court decisions, and to really hold Canada account. And so I know just like a small little bit about land claims and about what's going on in the country, but I do want to. There is a level of responsibility, and there's a level of fiduciary obligations that the federal government has to Indigenous people because they've signed those treaties. And then when we sign treaties, and if Canada ever signed a treaty and reneged on its treaty, there would be the United Nations to go after them, and there'd be some sort of process. But yet when people don't understand the process that are already here, that Canada is not living up to its obligation every single day, that becomes a problem. And so we have situations that are in Nova Scotia that is horrible situation, that there was very little in the way that the RCMP even acted on protecting people, but yet they used such brutal force to the out in BC and spent over $18 million on forcibly trying to remove people from the land, and as well in your area, Makasa, as well, with 1492 Land Back Lane, and villainizing us, right, and criminalizing us for standing up for our land. And so that's why I keep on saying that if you're really in solidarity with us, you would learn, you would understand the treaties, you would understand the Supreme Court decision, and you would go out to Land Back Lane and drop off some food, stand there, and even go and contribute into the land defenders, as well as the GoFundMe that's out on the Mi'kmaq territory. I just want to quickly kind of go over what some of your takeaways from Maurice's talk that he had on Monday, something that really compelled you, maybe something that you didn't know before, or something that you just want to talk a little bit more about. And Marshall and Gabriel, can I send it over to you to just kind of give me some of your initial thoughts and concerns, or what ifs, or aha moments?
Yeah, totally. The one thing I am still learning about the treaties, I don't know everything that went down, so that was I love the way he presented everything. It was I felt so, because I'm in a lot of Native Studies classes right now, and I already know about the genocide. I already know, I lived the reality of what happened, and I think he just gives a fresh perspective, and he dives deep into like how everything kind of what happened. He doesn't really talk about the genocides, and because we already know that happened. So I really liked that, and I really liked one of the cool things I thought about it was like the school books that they made, and they said they were teaching in some places. I thought that was so amazing. I wish totally I had that. It was just so refreshing of the positivity of it, and that he was Indigenous. You just couldn't get better. I want to watch it again, and I hopefully, I don't know, just the way it felt really fresh, and it just felt really genuine, and also just kind of repeating, like, I don't want to, like, I already know what happened with genocide. I already know what happened with residential school. Like, I don't want to talk about what exactly went in with all the abuses. Like, I want to know, like, okay, what are the laws? Okay, what exactly went on? And he really did that for me. And I thought that was just awesome.
Yeah, and it, like, for me too, like, it was really engaging. I loved how, like, like Gabby said, how in depth he was about a lot of the history that went on. I've learned about, like, a few of the things he was talking about just in university and some of the courses I was taking. But I think one of the things that kind of really resonated with me was how he talked about, like, the importance of knowing, like, who you are and where you come from. And I just think that that's, like, so empowering. And I just hope that, like, for every Indigenous youth out there to hear these like these important histories of, like, what nation building was all about, and, like, how Canada came to be. Like, if it wasn't for the treaties, like, like, colonizers wouldn't have access into these lands, and so on. So, like, I think that that's very, like I said, empowering for, like, any Indigenous person to know, like, once you have that sense of, like, pride and, like, identity and history, it can just really, like, help you excel in other aspects of your life. And I just think that, like, that if this is the first generation to start learning about the treaties at a young age in the school system, then it's a very positive step in the right way. And I also think that, like, like, once we have that sense of, like, pride instilled into us at a young age, then we're going to be so much further along than we are, than, like when I go and speak at, like, or talk with elders and, like, older Indigenous people. They talk about how, like, where our youth are now, compared to where these elders were when they were our age, and they're saying, like, oh, they're just so much further ahead than we were. We were just getting our, like, our education and stuff, and, like, we have youth out there that are already, like, organizing and on committees and on boards, right? And it's like, okay, well, now imagine if we could take it another step further, and now we have our young ones learning the history and the language and the treaty making and all that. It's just going to be such a very awesome future, and it's, like, looking really forward to seeing how it unfolds.
I think just kind of adding on to what Marshall said, was just, like, amazing. I think another thing was the military. Like, we weren't really recognized, and we did some really powerful things in World War I and World War II.
Yeah.
And it's just, like, we got these big statues of, of Caucasian and being nice people, and it's like, where are statues of I can't remember their names. I think the one of the last name was Prince, but anyways, I should remember them. But it's just, like, if we were actually teaching the history, like, how young Indigenous children would just be, flourishing so much faster, and it's just going to be amazing. I just can't wait until, like, we're going to be taught the proper history, and it's just going to, it's just going to open so many eyes, and I hope it does in a good way.
Makasa, what was some of your takeaways from Maurice's video, and if you have any other insights as far as a young woman who is doing the work, as well as your series that you have with environment and water, because there were some key things that Maurice was saying in there as well that probably resonated with you.
Yeah. Well, I'm going to be honest, I only got to watch the first 45 minutes of it, so I think I did miss a lot of what he was saying, but what caught my attention was when he first started out and he talked about the paper bowls and I think that's what they're called. And that we were deemed like not human because we didn't believe in Christianity, and that was their way of dominating the land. And they were instructed to go about the land as if it was not occupied and everybody was just animals, basically. And so that's how we were treated. And I think we also, and fast forwarding, like just having that like a horrible history of settlers coming in, and like it is what it is. Like it was, I gotta call it what it is. It was terrible, and it was genocide. And like I don't think it makes me so thankful of us being here today, because there were nations that did not make it. They didn't make it out of the sicknesses, and they're forgotten basically now. And like there's nations that did not make it, and I'm just thankful that I'm here today, and that you guys are here today, and all of the young people that I know today are going to school, and they're learning, and they're trying to make a change for their community, trying to better the water, better the housing. And like we did have treaties when, and yeah, I think that's just all super resilient. That just makes me realize like how profound, like having this talk today of raising Indigenous youth voices. And but like I also talked about, I also was thinking, and I was talking to my mom about like that we did have treaties before settlers came here, and all along like Niagara Falls was like trading posts for us. And she said that it was written that like, and I was just imagining like how beautiful would Niagara Falls be if like it was untouched basically, and it was full of trees, and what kind of wildlife would be there. How breathtaking would Niagara Falls be like untouched? And just like imagining it. And she said that like it was written like a squirrel like didn't have to touch like the ground because the forest was so dense between Niagara Falls and to New York. And just like thinking about like how dense and how tall the trees would be, and just thinking like, I don't know, how like wonderful life would have been like a long time ago when we were living as we should, and basically had peace among each other's nations, and had real sovereignty and real working government with women, with men, had chiefs and clan mothers and workers. And I don't know, I just like took a minute just to realize like how I don't know, how beautiful life would have been like a long time ago, and living together in a healthy way. So yeah.
And it's so true, because like Marshall, you hit something that was really important, because Justice St. Clair said the same thing. We have to know who we are, we have to know where we come from, and we have to know where we're going. And that was all robbed from our parents, and you know, and the education system. What our parents got and settlers got was the same thing that we got, you know, in residential school, or you know, in those boarding schools. Because you know, you were, back in the day, it was you know, you were ashamed to be Indigenous because of the way that society had treated. And not only that, how education has played in this. And so it really is really important to know who you are, where you came from, and where you're going. And you know, and I think I just learned that maybe when I was about 24 or 25, of who I am. I'm 60 and I still don't know where I'm going, but I am, you know, exploring those. But we have to have those kinds of conversations with our youth, because the youth really need to understand those kinds of things that are, you know, to have that time of who are you, where are you going, and where you come from. And we had our elders, we had our clan mothers, we had grandmas and aunties, and we lived in community. So it was easier to know who you are, the strength of your community, the resilience of Indigenous people. And we always thought of future generations, of 7 generations. And had we think about 7 generations now, I think that what we would be in is a totally different situation, because that takes an awful lot of thinking and an awful lot of planning, and to know where we are going in 7 generations. So 7 generations is like, I don't know, 700 years ahead, maybe even 500 years ahead. And so I can't imagine what our world will be like in 500 years. But yet we had elders that would, and prophecies that told us all these different things. So I guess we're going to start wrapping up pretty soon, but I guess I want to just, you know, touch base of what, you know, if you had a crystal ball, or if you were prime minister for a day, or not a day, if you were prime minister for a month, and they had to do everything that you wanted them to do, as far as like, let's get, you know, what would it be? What would your wish, or not your wish, your prime minister? So what would your role in that whole month of being a prime minister, what would you like to accomplish? Kailynne first.
Sorry? I can't hear you, sorry.
Sorry, Kailynne, I don't know if you heard, like, if you were going to be the prime minister and they had to do everything that, well, you passed laws and stuff like that, what would your role as a prime minister be for a month? What kinds of things would you want to, what kinds of things would you want to see happen in your month of being Prime Minister of Canada?
Wow, that's a really loaded question. What things would I like to see? Well, one thing that I think I would love to see is a lot more action and less just talking. I think something that our government tends to do is talk about changes they want to happen and talk about what needs to happen, but nothing ever really does happen. And there's a lot of talk and very little action, and it's something that has always bothered me about how the government tends to deal with issues, things like missing and murdered Indigenous women and girls. It's talked about, but nothing ever really changes. So I think something that I would definitely do is, and this is a very difficult thing to say because I'm not sure how to take action for that. I understand that is a very loaded thing to do, right? Because there's so many complications to why it's happening. But I think the first step is to actually start looking into corruption within our police forces, especially within reserves, and looking into why these cases are happening and why they're not getting solved and why they're being put to rest, and looking into the specific cases that we know of and starting from there and breaking down why these kinds of things are happening, because there is a reason. It's you know, a lot of these cases are being ignored by police forces and the government because they are Indigenous women. So, you know, they're found dead and they're immediately declared as accidents or overdoses, and they're not looked into further. So I think something that would have to be started with is definitely looking back into these cases and figuring out what actually happened and looking more into corruption in the police forces. But there's so much more when it comes to taking action and talking, and just not just talking. And I think that it's a very loaded thing to say. It's very easy to say, well, we should be taking more action, but it's hard to understand how that could actually happen, right? It's a very complicated thing to answer. So yeah, I would say start with that, but it is very complicated, and it's much easier to say than it actually would be done. But yeah.
Thanks. Makasa, what about you? You're Prime Minister for 30 days.
Oh, only 30 days?
Yeah, only 30. I was going to say a day, but I thought, let's do 30. Let's do 30 days instead of just a day.
Well, I would hire as many Indigenous women as I could, and I would implement the United Nations Declarations of Indigenous People, UNDRIP, and change all kinds of laws. I don't know. I get all First Nations access to clean drinking water and proper housing. And if there's any kind of land disputes like Nova Scotia or here at Land Bank, I would just give it to the natives because that's who it's properly supposed to go to. What else would I do? I don't know. I think I would praise Indigenous people up and make their voices heard and seen because it is their land, and make it so that Canadians are more grateful and raise our voices up in every single workspace. Make it a policy that we do land acknowledgements, but not also land acknowledgements, but stand in solidarity with the surrounding Indigenous communities. Yeah, and a whole lot of other things. I would not.
That's awesome. I love it. And that's all in 30 days, and it can be done. Just have to pass those laws. Marshall and Gabriel.
Okay. I would first dip in right into the education and history books, and I'd make sure we're all heard. I'd be changing all those systems the way we teach, because not one size fits all. I would be hiring people like crazy Indigenous people, just like Makasa said, definitely. And definitely in there changing policies and laws and making sure our treaties are heard up front. I would definitely just be diving into education hardcore, because that's where believe that's where it all starts at a very young age. Even just like a little, it just really I really believe that it starts there. And education just doesn't mean sitting in the classroom. It means so much more. Like, we're always learning, we're always being educated. You don't have to have a PhD in something to be educated on something. And I totally I just believe that. So I'd be working on that and hiring a lot of people, and making sure our voices are heard, our problems of drinking water are solved, housing, just like I would want to change the carbon footprint. Oh my gosh, for just hurting Mother Earth. I really believe that Mother Earth stopped the world for us, to really think and reflect in such a way where we all have to do it. And that's my go. Education. But I don't believe education is one size fit all, and I don't believe it's just in university. It's also on the land. It's also by our parents, or not just our teachers, but and so forth.
Yeah, holy, for 30 days. Oh, I think about this lots. First things first, I would give clean drinking water to all the communities in Canada. That would be a priority. I would seize all drilling and all oil and go back to the negotiation tables and bring all those leaders to the table from those nations and have actual, negotiations going on and get informed consent. I would do a dramatic federal bailout for languages in Canada, and we have a number of language families that are on the brink of extinction. So how I would do that is I would allocate let's say $50 million into a program that would go over 3 years, and then it would basically just be implemented into the education systems. It would qualify language holders to get them certified and get them into the classroom to teach languages. They would be precise, they would they would be tailored to like each community. So like I know each community has different dialects and so on. I would dismantle the RCMP, and I would probably just defund a lot of the police states. For example, here in Winnipeg, the police are overfunded, and I would defund them, allocate all those monies into like social services or Indigenous-led organizations, and like in the rural and in the urban environments, and as well as the child welfare systems. I would allocate the money into those services. Another thing I would do, geez, there's just a lot, and I think that, you know, sometimes when we talk about these things that the prime minister is capable of doing, which she is, you know, people think, oh, that's going to cost a lot of money to do that. Well, Canada spent a lot of money on assimilating and colonizing us, so they can spend a lot of money doing their fiduciary obligations by helping us. And what people don't realize is that, like, until all Indigenous nations in Canada are thriving and excelling and are functioning nations, then Canada is not legitimate, and it will never be. And until it does is when we can actually begin to move forward as like a country and begin to actually, you know, be that like that model country that Canada projects into like the international community. Because you know, like we could be like just amazing, but until we you know, honor the treaties, until we, you know, start to rebuild Indigenous nations, we won't be. So
Yeah, I think that I missed a few things, like environmental protection over water, pipelines, fossil fuels, and making our languages like official languages in Canada. And what else was there? Settling all the land claims that we have, because right now, like, we have so many land claims that Canada just does not like want to go proceed with, and is not going anywhere. And like they shouldn't be doing that. Like we need to settle these land claims. So like settling all the land claims, and I don't know, I like immediately like he said it, like stop like fossil fuels.
I think too, just like kind of adding on, especially in the time that like we're in right now, like we have a lot of conservative parties saying and leaders saying right now that, like, you know, our economy's dropping, like, you know, money, like, you know, we're not gonna have enough money. It's like, yeah, money runs the world, but, you know, if a catastrophic event happened, you know, like, we're gonna be surviving on the line. We're not gonna be eating money, you know. And it's just like, imagine if we worked all together, we used, you know, everyone, and it's just, that's what we did. It wasn't just, this is what, like, I think of, like, symbols or, like, pictures. This is what, like, the hierarchy of, like, what now is today's society, like, a human on top. And then, like, we are a circle, and everyone is in this circle. Every being that is living and breathing Mother Earth, you know, I just truly believe that. And, you know, we can't eat money. Let's eat the rich. I'm just kidding, though. Just kidding.
I have to say that it has just been so amazing to listen to you guys. Like I'm so honored. First, I was so moved listening to all of you, teary-eyed a little bit. I was throwing some words in the chat. I took some notes. I'm so proud. Sherry, you were awesome. She's such a great facilitator. Me, I'm all over the place. I get all emotional, and then I get sidetracked, and I don't even, you know, I can't remember things, because this is such a passion, right? This is my purpose. I have some people and you know, energies to acknowledge for making all of this happen. But I just, can I answer that question, Sherry? Because you know me, right? Like my husband's
Oh
in the
yeah, Jody,
background.
what would you do if you were prime
My
minister?
husband's in the background
30 days.
going, oh no, you're going to let a woman be in charge. Where's that button? And the first thing I thought of was like, I want to be that Truman Show, right? Turn every TV, every phone, every computer, everything on the four of you, right? Because everything you talked about was so amazing. You're getting it, like you get it, right? And I think that this is, we're in a time right now where, Marshall, you're so bang on about that space for grace and for each other, the solidarity, standing shoulder to shoulder, really understanding that, we have to give that space and we have to have patience. And the one thing that I love about what we do at Grandmother's Voice is that we are guided by the most amazing grandmothers and elders, right? And you guys know this. This is why elders are so important to people, is that they just live from this place of like the highest vibration. You're around them and they're so good, right? They're so good because they've been there, done that, and they just want to guide you to get to that place of purity and knowing. And so, I acknowledge all of our elders and our teachers and our ancestors. If it wasn't for them, I wouldn't be here right now. My journey has led me to my cousin and my mentors right now and the grandmothers that guide me. My great grandmother, my grandmother, my father, my lineage, the people that I forgot to acknowledge at the beginning because I get so excited to go live. But they know because I bring them in before I start everything, because I do this for them. I do this for the healing of my ancestors and my family. And I know that. And I know that that's what all of you do. And from my heart, I want to thank you for being able to take this time in this space to be vulnerable, to have these conversations, because you had no idea what Sherry was going to ask you. And, we just talked about being very, just come and be real. And I'm really hoping that this is going to be the first of many conversations that we have, because you guys were all fabulous. Kailynne, I'm so proud of you. You're like 16 years old and you are just the jam with information and for the, where you are right now in school. It's not easy for high school students right now to be in this pandemic, learning and being and knowing where you have to go. And so I appreciate you taking the space to be here, and for the, Makasa and Gabrielle and Marshall for being a support to her as well, because this is what this is about. This is what these platforms, this is what the mentoring, right? The bringing the youth together. And so, I don't want to keep talking because, I can. I just want to also shout out to our sponsors. Marcus from the Oakville Public Library here. He is such an amazing ally, brother to the work that we do in our community. And then also all the school boards that we collaborate with on a regular basis, from all the Catholic school boards in Niagara, Hamilton, Waterloo, St. Clair, Windsor, amazing, and all of the people in those communities that continue to support the work that we do. Remember this, right? Everything that you guys said about the grace and the patience, education, learning. We really have to be patient with all of the people that we spoke about. We have to understand that everybody's learning too. So, in all of this, thank you so much. And Sherry, for being like an amazing friend and making all this happen. I don't know if you want to sign off. Karen, for providing Speak Up and Empower's platform. This is just, this is awesome. Can you imagine if we were on everybody's TV in all of Canada right now? I think the world would change tomorrow. Our world.
No, I just want to say the same thing. Like, I'm just so honored that I was able to be here in the space with all of you. It's just wonderful to hear the youth perspective and youth voice, because that's really important. And, and all those things that we talked about as far as water and land and giving back and understanding the Supreme Court decisions and being Prime Minister for a month. Those are all things that we know we can do, right? as soon as there is going to be an Indigenous Prime Minister, we know that's going to happen. Maybe not in my lifetime, but perhaps in your lifetime. And it'll be just wonderful to have all those things that we talked about of having clean drinking water, because it's not Indigenous people that are dirtying the water. It's corporations that go up there to rape the land, to take the resources, and it's them that are making the dirty water. So you're making sure that those corporations have an obligation. But I just really want to say thank you from the bottom of my heart. This is amazing, and I'm so inspired by you guys, and I'm so grateful that we're going to be able to have another conversation soon. Thanks.
Would anyone like to say anything before we go?
I think the Indigenous Prime Minister is going to be me because I got asked to run for the Green Party, so I'll just climb my way up there. And
yes.
Yeah, right on, girl. I love it.
Green Party.
Right on. Okay, thank you, everyone, and we'll see y'all soon. Nyawa.
Thank you so much.
Take care.
Take care.
Bye.